If you ever find yourself standing on the marina in St. Andrews, Florida, specifically right as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, you might hear a sound that feels, I don't know, a little out of time.
Right. It's not a boat horn.
No, definitely not a car alarm.
Yeah.
It's this low, sort of resonant, almost mournful call. It's the sound of a conch shell being blown.
And for the locals, that sound is so much more than just a signal that the day is ending. It is, well, it's the acoustic signature of one specific man.
And that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, the life and legacy of William L. Tant. But everyone just knew him as Captain Scuba. He passed away back in 2013, but that sound, and really the entire industry he built from nothing, is still very much alive.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I first saw the outline for this deep dive, I just assumed we were talking about a Florida native. You know, a guy born on a boat, salt in his veins.
Sure, that would make sense.
But Bill Tant isn't from the coast at all. He's from Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
A guy from a landlocked industrial steel city who somehow looked at the Gulf of Mexico and saw an entire future that nobody else was seeing. How does a steel worker become the Sentinel of St. Andrews?
That is the central paradox, isn't it? And that's what we've got to dig into here. Today isn't just a biography. It's a look at how one man built a kind of pipeline. I mean, a literal and cultural highway connecting the steel mills of Birmingham to the shipwrecks of Panama City.
I do love a good origin story, but this one doesn't start in a garage. It starts up in the air. We're going back to the late 1940s. Bill Tant is serving in the 82nd Airborne. And from what I read in the transcripts of his own videos, his entry into the water wasn't because he loved swimming. It was because he just really hated doing chores.
It's the classic military move, right? Work smart, not hard. He was trying to avoid KP duty peeling potatoes, washing dishes, and he really did not want to carry these heavy 81mm mortar pods around.
So he finds a way out.
He finds out the 82nd Airborne needed swimming instructors.
Wait, why did a paratrooper unit need swim instructors so badly?
It's actually pretty grim. They were losing paratroopers who jump, land in the water, and then drown because they couldn't get out of their chutes or just didn't know how to handle the gear in the water.
So Tant pivots to saving lives, basically.
He does. And it's during this time he meets a guy from the Yucatan named Sato. And Sato has this very strange, very new device called an aqualung.
So this is the absolute dawn of scuba. We are not talking about the sleek gear you see today.
Oh, not at all. This is the era of the double hose regulator.
Can you explain that for me? Because I think we really take modern gear for granted. What's the big difference?
Well, modern regulators just give you air. You breathe in, you get air. Effortless. A double hose regulator, you had to work for it. The air pressure changed depending on your position in the water.
Really?
Yeah, if you rolled on your back, it might just start free-flowing air. If you looked down, it might suddenly get harder to draw a breath. It took real watermanship, you know, real lung power. It wasn't a toy. It was a piece of machinery you had to master.
And Tant was completely hooked. The sources say they strapped a tank to the back of a motorcycle and rode all the way to Myrtle Beach just to spearfish under the piers.
Just picture that for a second. A motorcycle, a heavy steel tank, and this complicated regulator just riding to the coast. That's the level of obsession we're talking about.
So the turning point is 1953.
Yes. He's back in Birmingham working at Hayes Aircraft in production control.
Production control.
Yeah, basically logistics, which, when you think about it, is the perfect skill set for what he ends up doing, moving tons of people and gear across state lines, but he can't get diving out of his head. So in 1953, he founds Southern Skin Divers Supply, SSDS.
1953. I just want to pause on that date because I don't think people realize how ridiculously early that is in the sport's history.
It's incredibly early. To give you some context, PADI, the agency that certifies pretty much everyone now, wasn't founded until 1966.
Oh.
NAUI came along around 1960.
So hold on. If there are no agencies who certifies you as a diver.
Bill Tant certifies you as a diver. That's it. There were no standard cards. If you learned from him, he gave you a card that just said Bill Tant's School of Scuba. He was the regulatory body. He was the whole agency.
That just sounds like the Wild West. Here's a tank, son. Good luck.
It absolutely was. But that meant his training had to be top-notch. He couldn't hide behind a waiver or a video course. He trained people in Birmingham at the Cascade Plunge Pool in a quarry called Kona Lake.
And being an paratrooper, the training was intense.
Oh, it was intensely physical. I read that he was known for doing half gainers off the diving board just to show the kids how it's done.
He led by example.
Totally. And he created this culture of earning it. There's a great story from a guy named Mark Ledford who was just a kid in 1977 with no money. He desperately wanted to learn to dive, couldn't afford it. Bill didn't turn him away.
What'd he do?
He let him work it off. Haul tanks, clean gear, sweep the shop. You work, you dive.
It sounds like he was running a family operation in the truest sense. He's working his day job at the aircraft plant. Meanwhile, who's filling all these tanks?
His mother. God bless her, as he used to say. She's back at his house, pumping air into tanks so they'd be ready for the weekend.
That's incredible.
He eventually rents his first real store from a Mrs. Flowers in Avondale for $25 a month.
$25.
And he lived upstairs in the shop because he didn't have an apartment. It was just a total all-in commitment.
Okay, so he's got the school running in Birmingham, but you can only dive in a quarry so many times before you get sick of looking at, rocks.
Exactly. He needs to get these people to the ocean. And this is where the genius of the Tant brand really kicks in. He didn't just sell gear. He built a clubhouse.
The Shipwreck Lounge.
The one and only.
Now, when I first read Shipwreck Lounge, my brain immediately put it on a beach in Florida.
And a lot of people make that mistake. But this is so crucial to the story. The Shipwreck Lounge, also known as the Hatch Cover, was in Birmingham, Alabama.
So you have a nautical-themed dive bar smack in the middle of a steel town.
Precisely. And it was the recruitment center. He decorated it with photos of himself and his paratrooper buddies, diving gear, mounted fish. It was designed to make you feel like an adventurer just by walking in the door. It was pure escapism.
And the food was unique.
Yeah.
Yucatan chili and tot taters.
He was building a mythology. You'd go there, eat some chili, hear Bill spin a yarn about a shark or a U-boat, and suddenly you weren't just a guy working a 9-to-5. You were an explorer. And you were absolutely signing up for that weekend trip.
Let's talk about that trip, because today, driving from Birmingham to Panama City is easy. It's a straight shot down the interstate. 4 hours maybe, but in the 50s.
No interstate. You're taking Highway 31. It was a 6-hour haul on a 2-lane road, stuck behind trucks and tractors. And Bill Tant led this convoy in what can only be described as a spectacle on wheels.
The Buick station wagon.
A massive Buick. One of his former students described it as driving a hotel lobby down the road. It was just huge.
But it wasn't just Bill and his wife Eloise in the car. I had to reread this part of the source material like 3 times. He traveled with a zoo.
It was a full-on menagerie. You've got Bill driving, Eloise in the passenger seat. In the back, you have 2 boxers, big dogs. And you have a macaw named Cortez who would just screech the entire way.
Okay, dogs and a parrot. That's eccentric, I'll give him that.
But wait, there's more. Tucked under an upside-down milk crate was a duck.
A duck?
Duck named Dub Duck.
Why? Why did he bring a duck?
Laughs. I don't think anyone really knows. It was just part of the entourage. The duck would quack, the parrot would scream, the dogs would be panting, and Bill's just driving this hotel lobby down a 2-lane road for 6 hours.
I can't even imagine being a teenager in the backseat of that car. That is a core memory. But this whole convoy, it really represents that pipeline we talked about. He was physically piping tourism from Birmingham to the coast.
He was. But here's where the story gets interesting. When they get to Panama City in the 50s and 60s, it's not a tourist town. It's a working fishing village. The whole economy was built on catching fish, selling fish, eating fish, not looking at them.
The locals see Bill Tant roll into town, this guy with a parrot and a bunch of air tanks, and they think,
They thought he was insane. There were no dive boats. Tant had to go down to the docks and literally negotiate with these hardened fishing captains, guys like the Kelly boys. He had to convince them to take men with tanks out instead of fishermen.
and I bet they were thrilled about that.
Oh, they laughed at him. There's a famous story where Tant tells them, one day boats will have air conditioning and showers just for divers. And the captains just said, that'll never happen. Fishing is the only way to make money here.
But he kept at it.
He was relentless. He basically had to prove his money was just as green as the fishermen's. And he willed that whole charter industry into being.
But to keep the divers coming back, he needed destinations. You can't just drop people in the middle of the sand. He needed shipwrecks.
And this shows another one of his skills. Finding a shipwreck in the 1950s is not like today. You don't have GPS. You don't have fancy side-scan sonar on your boat.
So how do you find something huge like the Empire Mica?
You use ranges. It's old-school mariner geometry. You have to line up, say, a water tower on the shore with a very specific pine tree, and then line up a church steeple with a dock piling.
Where those 2 imaginary lines cross.
That's where you drop the anchor. It took incredible precision and memory.
And he found the Empire Mica.
He did. It's a British tanker torpedoed by a U-boat in World War II. sitting in about 110 feet of water. He actually bet a Captain George Holland $200 that he could find it and dive it. He won the bet, and it became the premier dive site in the Gulf for decades.
There's a funny story about the Tarpon wreck, too. They were bringing up artifacts, portholes, old bottles.
Right. So they find these old bottles on the Tarpon that are still corked. And Bill, being the adventurer he was, decides he has to pop one open and taste the vintage liquid inside.
Oh, no. Don't tell me.
He thought maybe it was wine or spirits, something preserved. Nope. It was just seawater. The pressure at that depth had forced the salt water right through the cork over the decades. But that's just the kind of guy he had to know.
The logistics of just housing all these divers sound as intense as the diving. They weren't staying at fancy hotels, were they?
Far from it. Before he moved there for good, Taint owned the harbor master's house at Old St. Andrews, but he ran it like a military barracks. He'd sleep 12 guys in army bunks in one room.
Back to the paratrooper roots again.
Exactly. He'd wake everyone up at 7 a.m. sharp for sweet rolls, march them to the boat, dive all day, come back, and then spend the evening pumping tanks with this loud, gasoline-powered compressor right out on the street. It was noisy, it smelled like gas and salt, and apparently everyone loved it. It built this brotherhood.
I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, his environmental side. Because when you hear harvesting artifacts and spearfishing, you might think he was just taking from the ocean.
That's a really important distinction to make. He wasn't a plunderer, he was a waterman. He understood the balance. There's a story from back in Birmingham that really shows this, involving Eastlake.
Right, before the city drained it.
Yes. The city was going to drain the lake, which would have killed all the fish. So Tant organized this big effort to go in there, catch the game fish, and relocate them all to safe water. He didn't have to do that. It wasn't profitable. But he respected the resource. He saw himself as a steward, whether it was a lake in Alabama or a reef in Florida.
Eventually, that long commute on Highway 31 ends. In the late 1980s, Bill and Eloise retire. They sell the shop in Birmingham to the family.
By the way, SSDS is still there, still family run, which is just amazing.
And they move to St. Andrews full-time.
And this is where Bill's role kind of transforms. He stops being the operator and becomes the sentinel. He moved into that harbor master's house permanently.
And he really embraced the whole identity of the town, didn't he?
Oh, he did. He saw St. Andrews as a place for poets, writers, and artists. He loved the local hangouts like Tan Fanny's, and he even appreciated the rough and tumble side of it, the Saturday night fights. He didn't want it to become some sanitized tourist trap. He wanted it to keep its salty seaport soul.
And the ultimate expression of that soul became the ritual, the conch shell.
This is the image that really defines his later years. Every single evening at sunset, Bill would step out onto the deck of the harbor master's house, facing the marina. He'd have his cap on, he'd lift this big conch shell to his lips, and blow it exactly 4 times.
Why 4? Was there a significance to that number?
He said it signaled the end of a day well lived. It wasn't a show for tourists, though they loved it. It was a personal discipline. It goes right back to that soldier mentality, marking the time, acknowledging you've made it through another day.
It's just such a cinematic image. The silhouette of this man who spent his whole life underwater, standing on the edge of the land, making this ancient sound that connects the two.
It became the heartbeat of the marina. People would literally stop their conversations. They'd wait for it. It meant the boats were in, the sun was down, and St. Andrews was safe.
Bill Tant passed away in August of 2013. And reading the accounts, there was this immediate feeling of a void.
One source called it a palpable silence. The marina just felt empty without that sound. It's strange how a sound can become part of the actual architecture of a place. When it stops, the whole building feels like it might fall down.
But the story doesn't end there in silence. And this is the part that really gets me.
No, it doesn't. A local resident named Susan Perkins, she felt that silence and she just decided she couldn't let it stand. She went out, bought a tiger-striped conch shell, and she started going out at sunset to blow the shell herself, just to keep the tradition going.
And she wasn't alone for long.
No. Other people started showing up. It grew into this informal conch shell band. Sometimes you'd have up to 20 people all gathered at sunset, blowing their shells together. It went from one man's personal ritual to a whole community's tradition.
That says so much about his legacy. Usually when we talk about a business legacy, we look at the numbers. And sure, Southern Skin Diver Supply is a huge success. But to physically change the culture of a town.
That's incredibly rare. If you zoom out, Bill Tant is this amazing case study in how one person's passion can actually reshape geography. He took a city known for steel, Birmingham, and tethered it to a coast known for fishing, Panama City. He built that pipeline. He turned St. Andrews from just a place you park a boat into a place with a soul, with a mythology.
And he proved you don't have to be born on the water to belong to it.
Exactly. He was a paratrooper from an industrial city who became the very definition of a Gulf Coast waterman.
So next time you're driving down to the coast, or maybe just standing near any body of water, think about Captain Scuba. Think about that Buick station wagon with the duck and the parrot just barreling down Highway 31, chasing a horizon that most people just took for granted.
And here's a thought to leave you with. We often think of local characters as people who are just, eccentric side notes in a town's history. But Bill Tant shows us that a character can actually be an architect. He designed the leisure, the economy, and the actual soundscape of St. Andrews. It makes you wonder, in your own community, who's the person blowing the conch shell? And more importantly, who's going to pick it up when they're gone?
That's it for this deep dive into the life of Bill Captain Scuba Tant. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Dive safe.